Climate change and gender issues are actually two related things that has to be taken together. It cannot be taken apart. Why? Because when you talk about climate change, you want people to be able to cope, to be able to do actions. And when we talk about climate actions, you need knowledge, information, and all the assets. And at this point, it's also the most vulnerable groups who doesn't have information, knowledge, and assets to be able to cope and address climate change. And unfortunately, gender is playing a big part into that. Women doesn't have enough assets in most countries in the world, doesn't have enough power, doesn't have enough knowledge to be able to express themselves, contribute, and act, and also be considered in the policies which are being developed to address climate change. So climate actions, if it doesn't consider the limitations of women, the capacities of women, and the capacities of youth to contribute, would be very hard to pursue. So policy actions on climate change should specifically harness the power that can be contributed from youth action, from women action, because one, for instance, there are in a specific city, those who stay at home, who makes decisions on how they're going to use their limited resources are women and the youth. And if they don't have enough resources, when things suddenly change, like energy costs become so high, like rebuilding and retrofitting of houses which are vulnerable to impacts of climate change become so expensive, it's also going to be them who's going to be affected. So it's going to be important to see the limitations and the specific vulnerabilities that women and children have when it comes to responding and acting on climate change. So vice versa, when you have a policy and we're all crafting policy, we should ensure that those current issues of limitations on assets, limitations on knowledge of specific vulnerable groups, as I said, women and children, should be part of the consideration. Otherwise, we'd be creating more disparity in terms of results, in terms of improvements and impacts on the actions that we do on climate change.